Comprehensive Systems. My name is Anselma John Ayala, and I'd like to welcome you today to this double celebration we'll be having. On the one hand, we'll be talking about and addressing trauma as it appears in children. And on the other hand, we'll be celebrating Alexander Hamilton's 250th. So while we wait for the delegation to come in, I'll have our first speaker, who is Rhonda Simmons. Thank you. Rhonda Sinanen.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rhonda Sinanan, and I'm here to talk to you all a little about cultural trauma in children today. Cultural trauma is something that really exists. It exists in children in our society, and it's something that we all have to notice. For example, I'm from Trinidad. My husband is East Indian, and I'm, well, not Indian. So his family really wasn't pleased with him marrying me. So I have 4 kids for him, but my second son, he took more on my side then of the family. And I remember when my mother-in-law died, my eldest son, he looks more Spanish. The second one looks more like me. The girls, they look more Indian and Douglas. So when she died, this is something they did, and it wasn't nice. They gave my eldest son something from his grandmother. They gave the 2 girls a bracelet, but they never gave my second son anything because he wasn't more like them. He was too much like me. And my son looked at me and he said, "Mommy, why didn't you give me anything?" And I tell him, I said, "Don't worry, babe, I'm gonna get you something." And I felt bad. I felt bad for my child and for myself because he's a grandchild too, but just because he wasn't more like them, more East Indian, they didn't accept him. And this is something that happens in our society. Children are not accepted sometimes because of their race, because of even their gender, they're not accepted. And I would like people to realize, we as a society, that we should not treat children like this because it affects them mentally as well as physically. Children should be regarded as children. They all want to be accepted. Just as we as adults want to be accepted in society, they want to be accepted also. And we should accept them no matter what. Sometimes it may be hard for some people because, they're used to one thing, but children are children. They are going to be who they are. They didn't ask to come here, and we have to accept them and make them feel welcome and loved. So, as a society, I'm asking everyone, please. And if you see, it's easy to see because sometimes you may see a child being left out because of certain reasons. You can ask the child and just get involved and show them that you care. Just being there and showing them that you care means a lot to them. Any questions?
Kind of keep it down. As you can hear, I have vocal issues, but I'm still speaking out. And I'm hoping that whatever I have to say, you can take with you and begin to form something that is going to bring change to our society. Actually, I am going to share a little of my experiences. As a child, I was physically abused. And if you were to look at my body, you would be able to see that you would have to be close to me, of course. But I have a burn on my hand that happened when I was 1.5 years. And it was because I was sitting on the ground where my mother put me, and I was eating dirt. And she didn't like that. She said that she reprimanded me several times, and she had had enough. So she lit a paper bag and burned my hand. Later, I can also show you a scar that I have. She cut me with a knife. Right now, I am in pain because I have issues with my lower back. Because when I was 15, she beat me with the leg of a wooden dining table and broke my tailbone. And I was never taken for treatment. So my hips healed 1.5 inches off. And even 37 years later, I am still suffering the consequences of that beating. And that is just the physical abuse. I was sexually abused for almost 9 years by my stepfather. And he took me in with my mom when I was 5 months old. And I remember as early as 3 years old. I don't know how it started. I don't know why it started. Many times I blamed myself for it and then tried to figure out why. I don't think that there is a specific reason why a child suffers any kind of abuse. I don't think that there is any justification for physical abuse, sexual abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, or any kind of abuse at all. But the reality is that it happens, and it happens in our homes. It happens in our neighbors' homes. It happens in our community. And many times we have a suspicion, but we look away because if you have not experienced abuse, you do not know what that child is going through. If you have not suffered domestic abuse, you do not know what that wife is going through and what the children are suffering in that home. One of the things that I try to be very conscious about is that it doesn't matter if a person was abused once or if they were abused only when they were 3 or 1 or 6. Abuse is abuse. And the trauma that it leaves in a person's life does not have words that even me who have been abused, I cannot explain to you the level of trauma that I suffered in my life, the level of depression that I suffered. And sometimes people around you do not understand. They might label you weird. They might label you shy. They might label you angry. They might label you crazy just because you are going through a trauma that you cannot explain, that you cannot tell someone, listen, this is what is happening to me, and this is why I am reacting the way I am. Many times our predators have been victims themselves. And one of the things we were discussing the other day is that even though I went to many doctors, I went to many psychiatrists, I went to psychologists and counselors, and they gave me medication and more medication and more medication. And to tell you the truth, it didn't help me. Not that medication does not help, but it doesn't help everyone. It's not for everyone. And I have an adverse reaction to most medications, and the doctors couldn't see that. They were supposedly giving me medication that was supposed to help me be happy. Or at least gain some peace of mind. Well, I didn't. I was tormented by the flashbacks. I was tormented by the memories. I was even tormented by the way I still loved my mother, even though my mother was very physically abusive. The last beating my mom gave me, I was 22 years old. And I was driving the car, and she was sitting next to me. She was pulling my hair, and I could hardly see. And I was like, Mom, I'm going to get into an accident. I could kill someone. Well, she was trying to kill me, so at the time, she didn't care. She just kept pulling my hair until finally I jumped out of the car. Of course, I slowed down the car because I didn't want my mother to get hurt. But I jumped out of the car and started running. And even as I was running, I was wondering, where am I running to? Nobody's gonna help me. Where am I going? My mother sent my brother behind me, and he held me and he said, please don't run. You know that she's only going to get angrier and it's going to be worse. Just stop running. And I stopped. And my neighbors came out and nobody did anything. My mom threw me on the floor. She kicked me. She pulled my hair some more. And people just watched. I don't know what was crossing their mind. Maybe they were afraid of my mother. Or maybe they were remembering the goodness in my mom. Because although my mother was physically abusive, my mother was a very loving mother when she was good. My mom invited our neighbors. She taught us to dance. She taught us to play jacks. We exercised with her. She hugged us a lot. She kissed us a lot. But there were times that my mom used to stop being my mother and would become my enemy. And I'm not talking about just me. I had, at the time, 2 sisters and 1 brother. And we all suffered, but I was the oldest one. And because I knew that anytime she approached them, they would run, and she would get angrier, many times I would take the blame, and I would just lie down on the bed and let her beat me. It was easier than to see her getting angrier and angrier. You know, and I went to school, and my classmates had no idea that I was going through this. I had neighbors that were very close with my mom, and no one had an idea. I had a church, and I was, at 16, I was the general secretary of the church. I was the president of the youth group. I was the teacher for the children. I was very, very busy. And I think it was the only way I could stay sane, staying busy, just doing what I could to help someone else because I couldn't help myself. And the last thing I want to share with you is that I was able to forgive my stepfather. He actually had cancer. And when I heard the news, I broke down because I didn't want him to suffer, even though he made me suffer. And he lasted about 5 years, and he suffered a lot. But on his deathbed, the night before he died, I held his hand and I said to him, "You hurt me, but I love you and I forgive you, and I just want you to die in peace." Honestly, I wanted him to look at me and say, "I'm sorry." But he couldn't. He just closed his eyes and cried. That was enough for me. I was also able to forgive my mother. And although I have these awful stories to say, it was not all bad. It was not all ugly. And that is something that I would like for people to understand. Sometimes when we are dealing with the parents of children that have been abused or are being abused, many times we look at them and we look at them with such hate, with such anger, instead of wondering, how did this person get here? What happened to them? Why are they now doing this to their children? They didn't start as abusive people. They were not born abusers. Something happened to them. And because of what happened to them, now something is happening to the people around them. And so I always encourage forgiveness. And in dealing with people who are abusing others, yes, we need to be firm, and we need to be serious, and we need to be clear about our intentions. But we need to be compassionate. We need to be compassionate. We need to understand where these people are coming from. Because when I look to the right, my stepfather was a provider. We never lacked anything. He also did things with us. When my mother was not so well and was beating on us, he was my hero. He stepped in and many times got beat himself. My mother, as I mentioned before, was wonderful. She didn't have a medium. She was either very crazy and bad, or she was very, very good. And so I hold on to the good because I did not want to be bitter or angry. It doesn't fit my spirit. It doesn't fit who I am. It doesn't take me anywhere. For a little bit, I experienced anger, and it was a prison to me. It did not feel good. And so when I finally was able to forgive myself and let go of the guilt of whatever it is that was happening with me, I was able to forgive the people that hurt me. And I am speaking out, and there are people criticizing because I am speaking out. And I'm okay with that because my story now is not about me. My pain was yesterday. The people that hurt me was yesterday. My speaking out is about the people in your home that are being abused, in your neighborhood that are being abused, about the people in our island that is being abused. That is why I'm speaking out. It's not for me, it's for them. And I'm also speaking for all those people that have been abused and have been scared and have not been able to say anything. I'm speaking for people who do not understand that it is okay. It is not right for them to be abused. It is not okay for them to live depressed. You see me crying because I'm sharing my story, but I'm a very, very happy person. I live positivity. I cannot stand negativity. It's not a part of me. I learned a long time ago that it offers nothing. So even in the worst situations, I find a way to find the good and to find the right. And I encourage you to do the same. God bless you.
I'm going to continue with Zara Alvarez, and she will be speaking to negligence.
Good afternoon. Am I too close to the speaker? Good afternoon. All right. My name is Zara Alvarez. I'm going to be reading off of my paper a bit so that I can just cover the important things. I'm so honored to be here. Just to give you a bit of background, I'm a mother of 2 daughters, 22 and 16. I'm married and I have 3 sons now. I currently work as a case manager for the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, all formerly incarcerated individuals of all ages. I provide them with the tools they need to reintegrate into society. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. I was visiting St. Thomas back in March for the grand opening of the cafe at my brother's workshop. My husband was one of the speakers there. It was our first time in the Virgin Islands, and we both fell in love with the islands. We're from Los Angeles, so our beaches are freezing over there, unlike the ones here, where you could actually swim in them. So one of the things we noticed while we were in St. Thomas was that there's a clear need, just like the city I come from. There's you can tell the difference, excuse me, between the people that have, if you will, and the people that don't have. And so that's something that really resonated with me while we were in St. Thomas. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I moved around a lot, so I lived many parts of LA County, a city of 10 million people. When I was born, my mother was 19, my dad was a few years older. And my earliest childhood memories, they're very chaotic ones. Unfortunately, our stories are not uncommon. Mom was never home because she was working a couple of jobs, and my dad was busy getting high. He was a heroin addict and smoked PCP, and he was my caretaker. So that meant that on any given day, I was either left with his friends or I was riding along with him to go visit his girlfriends. When I was only 4 years old, I was left with one of his friends who took me to a store one day. He parked in front of the liquor store and put his hands in my pants and asked me if I wanted anything from the store. I remember being very confused as a 4-year-old. I was never taught whether that was right or wrong. I just felt uncomfortable. I knew that much. I have a brother who's 3 years older than me. I have the most memories of him and I being alone and navigating our way through the days, trying to find food in the cabinets. Mostly, our meals mostly consisted of ramen noodles and maybe chicken noodle soup on a good day. Taking walks to the liquor store with him was something we regularly did to steal candy and other snacks. Domestic violence and drug use were very common in my household. My early memories of my mother involved drug use as well. But from a recent conversation with her, I found out it was after she left my dad that she began to use cocaine and drink herself to sleep every night. My only recollection is that she would drink herself to sleep every night. She was never around. I was 5 when we left my dad. That day is a memory imprinted in my mind forever. My mom stabbed my dad, and he called the cops on her, and she was hauled off to jail. I remember her crying in the back seat of a cop car, and I was crying in my dad's arms as he asked me to tell the police my side of the story. He always involved me in their domestic situation so that I can be on his side. It's only until I got older that I realized that he was pretty much the perpetrator in this situation. The emotional neglect from a working single mother led me to find my comfort in friends who accepted me. I found my family on the streets in the most gang-populated city in the nation. Like a lot of young people do when they don't have support at home, I turned to the streets. Gangs were my family, so I was involved in a lot of activity that was just a product of my environment, really. The reality is there are a lot of single parents or parents who may be unable to connect with their children, or abusive situations in our homes, or even homes where both parents work. Either way, it is imperative that communities come together, parents and community members, government officials, public authorities, to create safe places for our children to go, to have an outlet for their new and creative minds. We all have to be a part of that change that we want to see in future generations. When I met Mrs. Ayala, I remember her asking me a very profound question that stayed with me. She asked, "What is something unorthodox you do when you work with your members?" As I said earlier, I work with people who have been in prison, who have served many years in prison, camp, or juvenile hall. What is unorthodox about the way I do this? I show them love. I treat them like human beings, like family. I always tell them there's no you versus me. There's only us and we. I'm not better than you because I have a degree. I know what it's like to hurt just like you do. In order to understand something, we must submerge ourselves in it, not judge it from the outside, and then not take action. Now, although I grew up in a big Mexican-American family, there was no support because we were all trying to survive the chaos. Into my teen years, there was heavy drug use, family stealing from family, incest, fights, suicide, overdoses. And because I had turned to the streets already, I was involved in that life. It was a call, I like to call it false love. My first sexual encounter was with somebody who forced himself on me. It was a rape. I was so ashamed of that I never talked about it until I got older. When I was 14, I became pregnant for my first boyfriend, a gang member. After all the courage it took me to tell my mother, she had no recollection of me telling her because she was so drunk when I told her. When she did find out, she took me to the clinic and told me that I was getting an abortion. I got to the point in my life where I felt I couldn't take anymore. When I was about 12 or 13, I remember having a conversation with God. I wasn't raised in the church or religious in any way, but I was desperate at this point, and I remember saying, "God, if these memories don't go away, I will take my own life because I can't live with them." After that, every time a memory came into my mind, I replaced it with a good thought. I think he gave me that idea because it worked. That was my survival mechanism at the time. Through my adulthood, I still struggled with with bouts of depression and old past thoughts. I got into unhealthy relationships that unfortunately my daughters witnessed. The home life is the most powerful example to our children. Regardless of what we think they aren't paying attention to, the truth is they will be just like us. God has had everything to do with my healing. And now I get to work with people who never had a chance, like myself. My experience has given me the sensitivity and insight necessary to really change lives. But I have had many mentors along the way who have chosen to invest their time in me, who chose to believe in me. I get asked, I get asked sometimes, is your work challenging? Yes, there are no shortcuts to changing lives, changing someone's thinking. And a lot of the work is changing an individual's thinking. But sometimes the most difficult part is finding people to believe in the people who want another chance. Thankfully, in my community, in Los Angeles, there are many programs that children and youth can turn to for support and mentoring. Crime rates have dropped dramatically since I was growing up in the 90s, when there was gunshots every night. I want to leave you with this thought. I tell this to some of the people that I work with because it can become discouraging when you talk about changing lives. It sounds like such a big task. Some people will break up the soil. Some people will plant the seed. Some will water the seed. Some will watch the seed grow. And others will reap the harvest that was planted. We won't always be there to witness every part of the process. So we shouldn't grow discouraged in doing something good in someone's life. As individuals, we can't do everything, but we can each do something. Thank you.
You know, putting this thing together was very, very hard because you actually had to go up to people and ask them if they were willing to share their stories. To my three ladies, I thank you very, very much because I know how hard it was for you to share your story. The thing is, we've advertised and advertised and we've sent this out to everyone that we knew, and nobody wants to actually deal with the fact that trauma is real. Stress is a real thing. It's a reality here in our society. My plea to you today is go out and let folks know that we are here. We're not here to judge anybody. That was done yesteryear. As Milagros so rightly said, we're just here because now we just want to give you an assessment to a tool that you can use differently, just do things differently. Parents only know how to parent the way they were parented. So this is not to actually bombard anyone or to point a finger at anyone. It's actually here for us to be able to strengthen our society. I have Dr. Latif from the UVI, and she'll just close us.
Good afternoon. I'm Beulah Latif, originally from Illinois. Moved to the Virgin Islands about 5 years ago as an educator to teach teachers in early childhood and special education. And I have each day grown in wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of how the world functions. And I've seen trauma. I attended the workshop in Puerto Rico last summer, and it gave me the language to understand and express what I've learned over time in relationship to the traumatization that happens in our world on a daily basis that we don't have the words for, so we don't express it and articulate it. Today, we are yet to be interrupted for celebration. Those are the kinds of things that happen to children on a daily basis, and we let it go. I'm not willing to do that anymore. I want us to recognize that today we were traumatized as a group by having brought people here to express their stories so that all of us can understand the real life that we live on a daily basis. And so for those of you who are present now, look at the chairs that are empty. Everyone needs to hear these stories. Everyone needs to share the compassion that I include in my instruction to my educators. This is the real world we live in. And as we walk in the streets, as we sit in our homes, we witness this. Please be verbal. Please stop what's happening to our children. If we don't want to live in a world like this for the rest of our lives, and I want our children to grow up in a world like this, stop it now. Speak out and say something out loud. Many, many people knew parents who were abusing their children, and they let it happen. Fear is a dangerous thing, and we can stamp it out by just standing up to be counted. Thank you so much for listening, and pray that we continue to act from our heart for the goodness of others. Thank you, thank you, thank you.